to get her little pointer to, I can hear you, but you cannot hear me.
Yeah. You can hear us? Good.
She needs to go to the video or there's something she can go to get it on. Is it the mute button?
Oh.
Try to see if you put the arrow on the mute, if that would help.
Oh, she said she's tried that. Hi, Rachel. We have some new people in with us tonight.
It's so exciting. And then we also see some lovely people from our past that we haven't seen for a while. I'm speaking of Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you look and sound great.
Oh, good. Okay. Last time you couldn't hear me.
You look good. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Do we have some people? Did we figure out who the numbers are at the bottom?
Yeah, Adrian Pike from Globeville and Chuck Norris, who is our technical advisor.
Okay.
But he's not real high tech. Oh, okay.
Fun fact, one of the faculty at my college doesn't even own a cell phone.
Really?
And just has a landline.
Wow.
I know. Middle
Ages.
Yeah, very much so. Well, he is a history professor, so maybe.
Yeah.
Holding on to history.
So.
Hey, I've got to defend myself a little bit. At least I'm not using clay tablets.
Right.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
With his flip phone. So, shall we get started? And then I'll keep a close eye, and for others that may join us. Now, I am going to do a screen share, and we'll bounce back and forth between the screen share. And I work very hard to.
Bridget, do you want to hold for a minute and do quick introductions for the new people?
Oh, right. This was just going to be like a little spirit thing to get us going.
Okay, cool. Carry on.
Everybody remember who that gentleman is?
I do.
I do too. I remember him. He's the one that made the Democratic Party finally take the Hispanic vote seriously. Before they just took it for granted. They still do, really, but when he formed the La Raza Party, that shook them up.
Yes. Wait a minute. Woo! Sorry there. Okay. So, why don't we do an introduction so we can start with you, Rachel? You have to unmute.
I know, Bridget.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, it's literally been the chorus of my life right now. Students and everything. You're on mute. Anyway, I'm Rachel Lehman. I am a professor of sociology and women's studies at the Community College of Denver. I am also your Healthy Communities Chair. So I do all things like just building community within our CAG and then also connecting our CAG to our larger communities. And so that's sort of what my role is.
Great.
Dennis?
Well, Dennis Gallagher, honored to be with you again. I'm the parliamentarian to make sure that we vote on all the motions that are offered. And just always been very interested. Many years ago when I was in the legislature, I represented Globeville in the state Senate, and they had a bill up to put a hazardous medical waste burning site across from Swansea School. And they were so proud of themselves. they said, oh, we get 90%, only 10% will go on the playground. Isn't that wonderful? We soon dispatched that bill to the dead letter file where it should have been. But it shows you how the city of Denver and the state treated those north neighborhoods like stepchildren. And it was terrible. So just happy to be with you. I was auditor for 12 years and they were so happy to see me go. That's how I knew I did a good job. So a joy to be with you. And still, as John Lewis said, trying to have good trouble.
Thank you, Dennis. Marie.
Sure. So I grew up in the area here I'll give a little bit more background, you know, than the quick introductions, I guess. So I grew up in Littleton and with traffic around like maybe many of you did, and close to Santa Fe Drive, in the coal train lines were just within about a quarter mile from my house, and riding on diesel buses when I was in first grade. And I've got my mom's on oxygen, have autoimmune issues. My son has asthma. So air pollution has been a big part of our lives, and probably like many of you, I just tried to, you know, continue on and not pay too much attention to this, but I am paying a lot more attention to it now in recent years, and look forward to talking with you all about that.
Thank you. Gail. Well, I guess Gail's taking a little break. Janine.
Hi, everybody. This is Janine Natterman, Public Information Officer for the State Health Department. I'm happy to be here and interested in your agenda.
Fonda.
I'm Fonda Apostolopoulos. I'm the state project manager. I've been working in the area since 1993, and I'm very familiar with the area.
Fonda, can we see your face?
I'm sorry, I thought I had it on.
No.
Let's see. Let me find myself here real quick and.
Take your time.
There we go.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, there you go. I thought the video was on because I thought I saw myself, but then all of a sudden they had so many people on the screen, I didn't know where I was.
Let's see. Gail, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Gail, could you just introduce yourself, and could you turn your video on so everybody can?
No, I can't because I'm out to dinner with my family, but hello, everyone, and I'm going to be listening in. I'm Gail. I'm from Globeville. I've lived there for 30 plus years.
Thank you. And 7413, that's Adrian. Adrian, could you unmute?
Hi, this is Adrian. I'm lived in Globeville for 20 years. I'm retired. I'm a biochemist. I did medical research here in the medical school and also in the United Kingdom. So I am now retired, so I don't have to do that anymore. But I'm really interested in the pollution problem. That has been one of my main concerns here is the pollution coming from the asphalt company on the west side of I-25. I live just on the east side of that. So air pollution is one of my major concerns because I can smell the creosote, which amongst all the other things that's in that comes out of there, and it's pretty potentially a potent carcinogen. So it's one of my things that I'm hoping that we can one day take care of.
Thank you, Adrian. Mary?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Mary Hernandez, and I grew up in the neighborhood Swansea, and I lived there for probably 30 years. I bought my first house in Globeville, which I thought would be better, but it wasn't. My family has been very poisoned from everything that went on the smelters and the highway, the new highway, when they dug it all up. And it's been quite the feat and quite a daily problem with my family with their health and everything. So I've been trying to advocate for the neighborhood for probably about 5 years. I didn't know years ago, and my dad didn't know he was a big advocate for the neighborhood. And so I've been working to try to do a little research and find out about why all these things happen to my family. And I just want to say thank you, and I'm so thankful for all you that advocate for the neighborhood, and you've just been a tremendous blessing in my life.
Thank you. Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck Norris here. I'm not a CAG member, but I am a geologist, hydrogeologist, geochemist, and I serve the CAG as a technical consultant in those fields to the extent that those fields overlap with the Superfund site. I'm trying to help the CAG understand some of the issues that are involved and the degree to which they're being addressed or not being addressed.
Thank you, Chuck. Jackie Lansing, welcome back. Can you introduce yourself?
Muted or not? Yeah, I'm here. I have a natural resources background, interest in pollution as it affects humans and animals and the like. So I'm not a member of the CAG. I live in Park Hill. I mean, and I just am interested in following what's going on and hoping that you all succeed in your efforts to clean up Elyria, Swansea, and Globeville.
Thank you. Have I missed someone? (2265). I guess we have everybody. So, and then there's poor Fran, who is our leader.
Hi, this is Angela Garcia. I am a member of Globeville First. I have been a resident of Globeville for 50 years, a homeowner for 28. I have asthma, I am a cancer survivor, and I am a former CDPHE employee.
Thank you very much, Angela. Welcome. So I'm going to switch now to screen share, and we will get on with the agenda. Let's see.
What's going on? Why can't, Fran, can you not talk? Are you taking a vow of silence for a little while? What's going on? Are you okay? We need to send back a...
She just can't get her computer to work.
Try turning it off and back on again. That's the fix for me 95% of the time.
She was on a little bit ago.
Try that. Okay. I was in class on Thursday and my computer, the Zoom just crashed 3 times.
Here's Michelle Swenson, who is joining us. Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
There she is. There's Jennifer or Bridget, there's a little bit of lag. Like when we admit people and when they come in, there's a little bit.
Michelle?
Hi.
Hi, do you want to introduce yourself? Could you turn your video on?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to put a picture up there and I was unable to. Michelle Swenson, yeah, and I've been working with the Poor People's Campaign some on census issues, handing out half-page flyers in Spanish and English, and that's kind of what I've been doing. Anyway, we're having a presentation Saturday in which I'm doing a piece about the broadband initiative on the ballot in Denver, 2H. You know, that it's been preempted since 2005 to have broadband on the in Denver at the municipal level. You know, to have municipalities create broadband.
Michelle is a journalist, and she has written many, many pieces for us on Huffington Post And she also has done a lot of community videos about our issues. So welcome, Michelle.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go and we're going to try to start our agenda. And so we already did this one. Okay. All right. So Zoom suggestions and etiquette. Mute yourself unless you're speaking. Please turn your video on if you can so we can see you. Hold questions until the end of presentations. Use chat to alert hosts that you want to speak or raise your hand. And try to keep your remarks concise and to the point. Here's our agenda. We did the introductions. We're going to have approval of the minutes. And then Marie Venner is going to speak. She's with Together Colorado. She's our new friend. We're going to have agency reports, the EDP, EPA, CDPHE in Denver. And then Chuck is going to do a report on OU2. And then Led, we're going to talk about the demolition of I-70 overpass and some of our questions. But as a lead into that, we're going to watch a video, Led, the Crime of the Century. It's 7 minutes, and it's very entertaining and very, very educational. And then we're going to talk about institutional controls, and we want to get a plan of action for them. And that would be Rachel and the silent Fran. And then Rachel is going to talk about CAG organization, and then we'll talk about our October agenda. Marie Venner, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your organization and what we might look forward to working with you on?
Sure. So I am a researcher by trade, and I've worked, before I was a researcher for the National Academies, which they have a cooperative research program for state transportation agencies and state environment agencies to basically improve their processes. So I've done about 50 of those studies. And before that, I worked for 2 state environmental agencies and managed the environmental section at CDOT here in Colorado in the late 90s, early until 2001. So I was quite appalled in maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I found that there was a lot, just a huge amount of air pollution and health effects research that wasn't being considered in the process of transportation decision making. And so I contacted the representative from CDC that tends to come to our transportation research meetings, and also the air quality specialists at the U.S. Department of Transportation, so the Center for Disease Control and USDOT, and offered to put together a compendium of research. Now, agencies have known for maybe 30 years that air pollution from vehicles and all caused a lot of problems in terms of strokes and cardiac effects, and also lung issues and asthma and emergency room visits. And I was surprised to find a few years ago that the cost benefit work that was being done, which was kind of an area I specialized in with research, still focused on what I would call that old set of diseases. Even though there had been this explosion of research really since, it seemed since 2010. And I consulted with one of my colleagues, Jim Crooks, at National Jewish Respiratory, and he said, yeah, basically all of the research that was beyond respiratory and cardio was since 2010. And what I put together, which I wanted to share with you this evening, is is really not sophisticated. It's the sort of thing that any of us can do, or we can even work together to keep up. But basically there's a website called Science Daily, and it reports recent scientific findings in lay people's language. And often they do interviews too with the authors, so they can just, again, really highlight the takeaways in lay people's language. And of course, they have links then to the, the original research, as well as the, the popular translation there. And so I just basically went through health effects research at that time, just maybe 5 years back. Now, so much of it was in the previous 18 months to 2 years, so this is really recent stuff. But what I was so surprised to find, and again, it's terrible that this is not taken into consideration in public decision making, is that this air pollution factors into every sort of health effect or condition that's out there right now. So learning disabilities, anxiety, depression, even happiness, for instance. So this isn't health related, but they were looking at stock trades and trying to make all sorts of different correlations. And I heard they looked at hundreds, maybe it was 1,000 different things. And they did not find a correlation with anything except air pollution. So basically people feel worse, when the air pollution is worse. And our bodies evolved over, at least 200,000 years, dealing with infections. So our biology is kind of constructed and experienced at dealing with infections. This pollution that we're dealing with biologically is unfamiliar to our bodies, and it causes inflammation, and our body is trying to react and deal with it. But that inflammation itself, our body's attempt to cope with that, causes so many other problems. So both health research and statistics have evolved, since I was in graduate school. We used to hear about correlation, and that there was correlation, but there wasn't causation. And so, they couldn't say it was from this. Well, I guess things have become quite a bit more sophisticated, of course, in terms of both biology and the analytical methods. So a few years back, scientists and medical researchers were able to say that 21% of Alzheimer's and dementia cases are caused by air pollution now. So, and they're able to, of course, with the statistical analysis, they'll control for very many other factors. Bridget and Fran and I were talking today about, the terrible burdens people feel in terms of personal responsibility. Oh, we have this other risk factor in my family and that risk factor, and maybe it's from this. Well, the medical research has controlled for all of those other risk factors, that we take on and often feel so bad about. But air pollution is causing a great deal more problems. So again, it's related to suicides, it's related to appendicitis, it's related to breast cancer. Breast cancer is one of those things they haven't actually found too many different connections to, very many different things. So it's so surprising how implicated air pollution is. And so what I had thought we might do this evening, and I don't know if we're really set up to do this, is we could go into this Google Doc, and any of you on this call who have particular, you're concerned about particular categories of illness or conditions, we could talk a little bit about some of the medical findings or highlights in those areas. So, and this is something we could keep up if you want. Another thing I can talk about here.
Somebody needs to mute. We can hear your conversation. Sorry.
That's me. How do you mute? How do you mute?
Who is me?
There might be a
But
button on your phone. If not, it's no problem. So another thing that a lot of us are working on this year is we have some decent laws in Colorado. For instance, we have some climate laws that took a couple years to pass. These are basically air pollution laws. And they finally did pass, and they're not perfect or the best thing by any stretch, but it turns out that it's like we're one of the 4 states in the whole country that has deadlines and limits in law for greenhouse gas reductions that need to occur by 2025. But even our Democratic governor, and they're just disregarding, they're completely ignoring the deadline. They were giving indications last summer, last fall, January, February, even pre-COVID, that they were going to ignore this, and then they finally in May came out and just said, we're going to, ignore it. We don't think it applies to us. I mean, it's quite galling. We're lifelong Coloradans. I heard, many of us, I've been here for 50 years. We have businesses. We're expected to follow the law. So why isn't the state and the governor expected to follow the law? When so much work went into passing these laws. It's just
Marie, excuse me just a second. If you're on the phone and you need to mute, press 6. 6?
Star 6.
Star 6.
Yeah, star 6.
If you're on their phone and you need to mute, press star 6. Thank you. A new trick.
And then when you want to speak, you can press star 6, I think, again. So we have this in law to make these reductions, and we're not getting cooperation from the state. So in October, we are going to try to have a Zoom meeting like this with Jared Polis and as many community members as we can to ask him some yes/no questions to try to get that commitment out there. So it's called a pinning, like a community pinning event. So we'll stay in communication about that. Another thing that we're working on is with Excel. So we're having a vigil out in front of Excel from noon to 1, Monday through Friday, so every day, because Excel is one of these big Wall Street traded firms, and it's basically it's a big money extraction scheme, monopoly from Colorado. We could have an actual public service company of Colorado, like a nonprofit, and employ a lot of the same people, but not send almost $600 million to Wall Street every year.
Marie, on that light note, it might be that we would have some health questions. Perhaps Mary Hernandez could sort of represent our group,
right,
and ask a few health questions about causation. She has a lot of sickness in her family. Mary, would you be willing to do that?
I'd be willing to do anything you need me to do.
Okay, so why don't we take a few minutes here and you could ask Marie questions about different health impacts that your family has suffered, and or that you know of people who have suffered, and perhaps you could comment about the connection between those and air pollution.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have my list here. I have a family tree that I made that I have all the sicknesses, and I haven't even gone into my husband's family. Most of them have passed away. But I have a sister that just had the breast cancer with the glands underneath her arms. She had breast taken and her glands taken out, and she's doing better now. I have 2 blind grandkids. Okay, I'm back. They were born blind, and one of them has cerebral palsy. I have another nephew that has cerebral palsy, and I have another nephew that has cerebral palsy. I have lupus in my family. I have degenerative disc disease. 2 of my family has that, and they've had surgeries a couple of times. A lot of asthma in my family, a lot of the grandkids have it, a lot of the nieces and nephews have it. It's been passed on through generations. I guess the endocrine system is really, really messed up in a lot of the family members. I have a lot of family members that can't have kids. I have family members that have had a lot of miscarriages. I can go on and on. Everybody in my family has some kind of issue. My sister's had many surgeries for hysterectomies, a lot of hysterectomies in my family. So, I mean, I could give you a list.
It's so much more harmful than was realized earlier. Another thing that came up in our discussion today was, of course, how lead, there's no safe level. So we're familiar with that, but now doctors are saying the same thing about air pollution. So for many years, we didn't really think we had that much choice, or we would hear our government agencies very self-congratulatory. Oh, well, it's a lot better than, the early 70s. But the thing is we do have choices now. We've had choices for 20 years. In fact, if we look back for over 50 years, I'll share a Time magazine issue on smog from 1967, and the last page of that talks a lot about climate change, and that the car companies at that time were offering the reporters, they said, rides in electric vehicles, and they projected to switch over in 10 years. And I was just very shocked to read this. So that's in Time magazine. I can get that to you. But, I guess even more solidified than Time magazine is that in 1965, there was an all executive branch report on air pollution and climate change that said this was going to be a huge problem and it really needed to be addressed. And so the American Petroleum Institute and all of those fossil fuel companies came together to basically fund an examination of the literature and try to counter it, and hired their own consultants. They looked at over 200 studies at that point. Of course, now there are thousands and thousands of studies, and they said, this is the only explanation for this. They basically agreed with it in 1968. So, what we've had the last few decades, especially the 90s, the early 2000s, so heavily for the last 30 years is a lot of, advertising and basically lying and delayed action about this. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the health effects research is really ramped up. Something that's important for everyone to know is that in study after study, they have looked at, and again, controlling for all these other variables, they've established that the health effects are there and significant at below US EPA safe levels. So they can discern these differences, a gradation of differences, even at air pollution levels in rural areas. right? Which is kind of interesting. So way out in the cleanest areas, you know, they can still tell the health effects by like looking at Medicare across the whole country, you know. So and they can tell the pollution that people were exposed to 30 years ago, or if it was 2 years ago. I mean, all of this matters, and there's data about it. And if you're interested, I mean, I'm very interested in this area. I'm glad to talk with you as much as you want one-on-one about this. And Bridget and Fran can share the document. Even if you just look at the table of contents, the headings in the table of contents are I tried to make them kind of like the takeaways, the main points. So you can even just look at the, you know, the table of contents by disease area or just overall exposure. You know, it starts with the overall exposure stuff. So even if you were exposed 30 years ago, even if it, you know, 2 years ago, even if it's a low level. So basically they have documented that your exposure, you know, it creates a line, a dose response curve. So the more you're exposed, the worse things get for you. So if you grew up around more pollution and more traffic pollution, so I got into this from the transportation end, you know, basically the worse it is. And there are some doctors now, and we can quote them, that have said there is no safe level. This dose response curve, this line, even down to low levels that they can see differences in, it really strongly points to that there is no safe level of this, and that reducing air pollution is one of the cheapest, best things that we can do to immediately improve people's health and how well they feel. And, you know, for instance, Bridget and Fran were telling me when we were chatting earlier today, you know, they said, yeah, when Candy C. DeBaca, you know, went to school and moved away from this area, her migraine headaches, you know, went away. I mean, there's people, so this comes back to these, you could say, climate effects and Excel energy, because those are some of the big things that can change rapidly, right? All of our houses, all of our existing cars, those are things that are not going to change rapidly. What can change rapidly is some power plants, you know.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. On that note,
okay.
You have been wonderful, and I thank you, and we really look forward to incorporating.
Right, I could talk way too long about this.
Don't
and
get me
I
started
promised
on
I would
this.
finish by now. I'm just looking. So, but
thank
do
you
know,
so
I'm glad
much.
to chat with anybody, and I will have to drop off pretty soon. But are there any questions for now?
I think you pretty much covered it, and we're very interested in working with your organization. And thank you very much.
Yeah, Together Colorado has been around for 40 years. It's part of the Faith in Action Network. Nationally, it used to be called PICO. And I'm also part of Call to Action, which has been around also for 40 years. And I'm pretty much a lifelong Colorado resident, and just, you know, very happy to be connected in any way that works for
We are
you
not
all.
alone, and we are collecting more friends as we go along. Thank you.
Yeah, very
I'm hoping to
grateful
stick
for all
with
your
this
work.
for a little
Okay.
while longer.
All right.
We're going to go to, let's see, wait a minute. I've got to get this, let's see, screen share. There we go. Oh, come on, damn you. Okay, so the next thing is EPA. Is there anyone here from EPA? No. Anyone here from Denver? No. And CDPHE, there's someone here from CDPHE, and I would like to defer your update until after we've had Chuck's presentation and a couple of other presentations so that you can respond. Is that all right with you guys, with Janine and Fonda? Okay. So Chuck Norris, update on OU2.
All right. The activity I've done at OU2
OU2
has,
is, Chuck, excuse me, I'm sorry. OU2 is basically the Coliseum and the Globeville Landing outfall area. Go ahead.
we have recently received a couple of documents that the various agencies have been working on toward establishing a desirable scope of work for redoing the remedial investigation and some of the risk assessments and those kinds of spin-offs for OU2. We have, I have gotten them, the CAG has gotten them anywhere from several months to weeks after they were issued. So we're behind the curve in terms of seeing where the city is anticipating going with a revision to the remedial investigation at OU2 and how their ideas are playing to the state and the federal agencies. Because we're so far behind looking at the materials, we're at a position where the first work product of what the city is doing toward doing it is a technical memorandum scoping the work that should be done for the remedial investigation. The draft, first revision of the draft of that scoping memorandum was published at the end of April, and we got it in mid-August. And the comments from agencies and some back and forth we received about a week, 8 days ago. I've done a quick look at those documents to get an idea of where the scoping document is, because that controls what the work plan is going to be for the remedial investigation, which controls the adequacy of the remedial investigation. I am very disturbed at looking at the documents I've got. There are a number of observations by the city's consultant that very clearly demonstrate the consultant is aware of some of the inadequacies of the original remedial investigation, but so far the scoping document does not address those inadequacies. In some cases, it appears to be outlining a potential scope of work that will more institutionalize the mistakes than try and revise them. We don't have enough time. I'm not far enough along in my review to share with you specific critiques, but what I am going to put to the CAG, and I will send it out in an email later tonight, is a proposal that the CAG get together remotely on to vote in favor of a recommendation to the EPA that a document that right now is being designated as the final technical memorandum scoping the revised remedial investigation be recharacterized as a draft final of that technical memorandum, and that the public be allowed to comment and that the CAG be allowed to comment on that draft final, that there be a 30-day opportunity to improve that scoping document, followed by a 45-day response time for the EPA and CDPHE to incorporate those comments, to respond to those comments, incorporate the improvements that might be proffered, so that the technical memorandum scoping the RI produces a meaningful work plan for the RI, so that we can produce a meaningful RI, remedial investigation, because that drives the risk assessments for human health, for the environment. It drives the feasibility study and the ultimate solutions that come out of this process. I think it's time to try and modify this system right now, because the technical memorandum, as it's being driven, is simply going to lock in place an inadequate program, I believe. And so anyway, I would suggest, I'm making a proposal, since it isn't going to be able to be looked at now, and this final technical memorandum is going to be issued before the October CAG meeting, that in the next few days, the voting members of the CAG get together remotely and vote to make a very strong recommendation to the agencies that document be downgraded to a draft final, and that there be a serious, meaningful opportunity for the public and for the CAG to help advise the agencies on ways to improve what they're setting out to do. So that's really what I have to say tonight. Recommendation and possible suggestion of the language to put before the agencies, I will send to the CAG after this meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Great.
Mary, could you mute? I think you're drawing and we can hear this scritch, scritch, scritch. Thank you.
Well, she's over there doing a masterpiece in the middle of this CAG meeting. I'm excited.
I know, so that's great. So let's see, I've got to do, all right, so the next item is we're going to have a little bit of show and tell. We're going to have a video, by Dr. Bruce Lamphere on the hazards of lead. Let's say I want to do screen share. All right, and now we're going to do a slideshow. We're going to have, wait a minute.
Over the past century, the pandemic of lead poisoning, a corporate collusion to extract immense profit from the sale of a poison, cast a shadow over the planet, leaving in its wake death, disease, and crime. In the 1960s, during the peak of the pandemic, hundreds of children in cities across North America died every summer from lead poisoning. Dr. Needleman found that the amount of lead in children's baby teeth, which is a good measure of a child's exposure to lead, predicted how well they did in school. Children who had higher levels of lead in their teeth were more likely to be hyperactive, impulsive, low functioning, and distractible. To show how lead exposure increases the risk for ADHD, let's look at 2 schools, each with 100 students. In the first school, students have low lead exposure, about 5 have ADHD. In the second school, students have higher lead exposure. 13 children have ADHD, 5 from lead poisoning. If we apply these numbers to the entire country, about 3 million children have ADHD. By eliminating lead exposure, we could prevent 600,000 cases of ADHD in the United States. The levels of lead that increase the risk for ADHD and other types of brain damage are exceedingly low. In 2012, the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization declared there is no safe level of lead in children's blood. This shouldn't be surprising. Even though the body burden of lead has dropped by over 90% since the peak of the lead pandemic, it is still 10 to 100 times higher than our pre-industrial ancestors. Lead toxicity doesn't only impair children, it affects people over their entire life. The ability to think and reason increases as we mature, peaks during young adulthood, and then begins to decline in our 60s. Children who have higher lead exposure never reach the same peak ability as children with lower exposure. At the other end of life, adults with higher lead exposure have accelerated decline in their mental abilities and may develop dementia sooner. In a Cincinnati study, young adults who were more heavily exposed to lead during their childhood were more likely to be arrested for violent crimes. These results are mirrored in homicides over the past century. Children's exposures from lead and paint and gasoline are reflected about 21 years later by higher rates of homicide. Violent crimes declined dramatically over the past 4 decades in lockstep with the decline in blood levels. Over 50% of the decline in violent crimes was due to falling blood levels. All other factors, like poverty and the number of police, only accounted for 30% of the decline. Lead is also a risk factor for coronary heart disease. That's when your heart is slowly or suddenly suffocated by an obstruction of the arteries feeding the heart. In a national study, we found that deaths increased sharply at blood levels below 50 parts per billion, the level considered safe. There was no threshold or safe level. If we let the narrowing of this coronary artery represent the risk of dying from heart disease, you can see that most of the narrowing occurs below 50 parts per billion. We found that lead accounts for about 185,000 deaths every year. That makes lead the leading cause of fatal heart attacks in the United States. Beginning in 1892, about 20 children in Queensland, Australia were lead poisoned every year. About half of them died. After years of failed attempts to educate parents to change their children's behaviors to avoid ingestion of leaded paint, a pediatrician, A.J. Turner, said, "Prevention is easy. Paint containing lead should never be employed where children are accustomed to play." Despite this warning, the paint industry continued to add lead to paint. 2 decades later, when the lead industry was poised to add tetraethyl lead to gasoline, Yandell Henderson said, "The use of lead would cause vast numbers of the population to suffer from slow lead poisoning with hardening of the arteries." Still, the U.S. government allowed companies to add millions of tons of lead to paint and gasoline. The lead industry knew it was toxic, yet they mounted a major campaign to deceive the public. The first crime, failing to prevent the lead pandemic, despite the early warnings. In the 1940s, paint companies reduced the amount of lead in paint because it was needed for World War II. After the war, the petroleum industry expanded the production of leaded gasoline. They couldn't help themselves. It was too profitable. The second crime, immense wealth at the expense of public health. You may recognize some of the corporations who profited from the sale of lead: Standard Oil, Dutch Boy Paints, DuPont, Sherwin-Williams, and General Motors. In 1967, René Dubois, a scientist, warned, "The problem is so well defined, so neatly packaged, with both causes and cures known, that if we don't end this social crime, our society deserves all the disasters that have been forecast for it. Still, the lead industry continued to add lead to gasoline, paint, canned foods, water service lines, and other consumer products. Ultimately, over 12 million tons, or 11 billion kilos of lead, was disseminated into the environment, the equivalent of over 100 Chrysler buildings. A toxic residue of lead now lingers in our cities and neighborhoods and continues to poison children. The third crime, once lead was declared toxic in affluent countries, corporations increased sales to industrializing countries. Now, over 90% of children who are lead poisoned live in industrializing countries, especially in Southeast Asia and Africa. Why does the lead pandemic deserve to be the crime of the century? It isn't only because it was the largest mass poisoning in history, exposing billions of people to a toxic metal, or that the lead pandemic was entirely preventable. It isn't only because immense wealth was made by a few at the expense of people's health, or that it is a leading but largely ignored cause of violent crimes and heart disease. The ultimate reason lead is the crime of the century is because the perpetrators of this horrific tragedy were never held accountable. In the absence of a global treaty to ban all non-essential uses of lead, countries around the world are taking steps to protect children. Denmark banned all non-essential uses of lead. The Philippines and India banned lead-based paints. The city of Rochester tests houses for lead hazards before they are rented to families with children. Cities in California sued paint manufacturers to help reduce lead hazards in housing. Lansing, Michigan replaced their lead service lines. It won't be easy, but if every city and country took these steps, we could eliminate lead poisoning in the next generation.
So the reason that we bring this up is because soon they're going to be taking I-70, the overpass down, which we understand has been painted with lead paint at some point, some layers. And we're very concerned about protections for the residents, workers, of course, but for the residents, some who Swansea Elementary School and residents are within just a few feet of these, of the bridge. So that's why we're very concerned. So we were wondering, Fonda, if you would like to address some of our concerns. I mean, you've been very good. You've shared some information with us, and we would like to hear some more from you. But we can't hear you. Fonda.
Got it. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, that's not my area of expertise. When Mary brought this to my attention, I brought it over to the people at Kiewit who are responsible for doing the work, and they have a plan in place where every time they have anything they're demolishing, they have to do a survey on that property. And the survey includes asbestos, lead, or other contaminants. Once the survey is performed, then they have to have a plan in place to where how they're going to basically abate that. When they have the abatement, they have to get a permit from CDPHE from the air program, and that is basically the process that goes on. It's no different than if people are abating asbestos in homes or in other places. So there's a process in place. People have to be certified, they have to be trained adequately, and when they apply for the permit, it has to be approved through CDPHE's air program, and they're allowed to do their work. And then they also have inspectors that come out to oversee their work and things like that.
Would it be a public opportunity for a public hearing for permit is issued?
I don't believe that's ever been the case, but that's something I can ask, but I'm not sure, that's not something to where I can mandate or anything like that. All I know is that it's just no different than a typical abatement process. So,
So has a survey been done, do you know? And the plan drawn up?
According to the paperwork we gave you, that stuff, there's a link to there that shows what's been done.
Do you know if the survey has been done?
No, I did not look at that because again, it's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
I just got the information.
So Janine, who would we contact over at CDPHE to find out what stage this is in? Thank you, Fonda.
Well, that wouldn't necessarily be CDPHE, would it, Fonda?
Actually, there is. It's a permit process for abatement, so it is through the air. I believe it's through APCD. There's a program. It's like asbestos abatement, lead abatement. They have a program. I'm not sure which division it's under. I believe it's under the air program. But there's a. Did you see that response I sent back to the CAG earlier this afternoon?
No, I didn't. But I did get an email from someone that might have been Bridget actually that sent to. I'm looking for this email here. Kirk Minkler, but nope, that's not him. Wrong site.
David?
Could be David.
In the
I have to follow.
Department.
Well, I have to, no, it's his division, but that's not what he does. So what I have to do is follow up with him and together we'll explore what part of air pollution control division actually has anything to do with this.
Okay, so I think that the community would appreciate an opportunity to consider the survey and the plan and to have our experts look it over, and then perhaps an opportunity to have some public input or at least to be able to sit down with CDPHE, perhaps Kiewit, to ask questions and to be very clear about how this process is going to take place, if that would be possible.
I mean, we'll have to figure out which program exactly it is, but it says here, all asbestos abatement work is strictly regulated by CDPHE and OSHA. I'm trying to see what we have here for structural survey completion report, building abatement demolition. I'm looking at the link I gave you. There may be something here where on this link, I'm just trying to find out where they have it. They show all the buildings that were demolished, what they did.
Right. We don't have to do it right now, as long as we understand that the CAG is very interested in the process, and we would like to be able to have the opportunity to talk with you further or have further communication and determine where it is in the process, and then to find out what the survey found in the plan and to have our experts look at it so that we can reassure the community that in fact their lead load is not going to be increased by this demolition.
I will see if I can find out which program it's under and if I can get them to talk to you directly. That's the best way to do it, because that's not my area of expertise. You're going to ask me questions going to go back and forth. So I will get a contact with CDPHE who you guys can talk to directly.
Thank you very much. All right, so the next thing that we wanted to talk about, Rachel perhaps can talk because Fran has lost her voice, is about the institutional controls. And Fonda and you and Janine can chime in on this at any point. Let's see.
We want muscle. Don't worry. You are not going to become a competitive bodybuilder.
Let's see, slideshow. No, we have to keep going through. Here we are. So these are the, can everyone see this? These are the homes that were either not tested or were tested and found to have higher than the action level of lead and arsenic. And some of them were tested, but the owners wouldn't let the EPA in, and some of them were never tested. And they are sprinkled throughout our community, or the communities of Swansea and Elyria, and I believe in Globeville as well. So Fonda, do you have an update on those institutional controls about what happened when EPA went down to the clerk and recorder? I know that you found that some of them apparently did receive notices.
They have all received notices. The problem is this: we had our AG's office do a title search. This is something that anyone does on that. And we asked them, if you do a proper title search, can you find these notices? And we picked, I gave them a random sampling of properties that we had, some that were either sampled, some that were not sampled, and some that actually had the notices to make sure they were removed. And on those random sampling, I think I gave them 5 properties total. They were able to find all the notices on the property, and they were able to find the one that was removed also. So I'm not sure what's going on, if it's a problem with the people doing the title searches, or if there's a problem on the way they were recorded. All I know is that our people were able to, the AG's office doing a proper title search was able to find the ones that we had given them.
So I think that according to the EPA, to the 5-year report, the last 5-year report, when the EPA, the person who did the report went down to the clerk and recorder, they discovered that all of the notices had been filed under the owner's names, not under the title, not under the addresses. So that when their conclusion was that when a normal title search was done, that they would not turn up. So your information has been very helpful. And Rachel, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the possible follow-up that the CAG could do?
Absolutely. So there's a couple, there's sort of we're doing like a CAG day down in our community. And one thing that we want to kind of like have, while we have everybody together, we want to have people meet down in the community where they feel safe, obviously masked outside, all those kind of good things. And we want to drop off literature, try to like make sure that these people that are living there know the history of their address, know that what's happened, and to ascertain if they've had any remediation, and kind of just figure out, it's so much easier to see it from the street, to be actionable from the street, than it is from online, looking at maps, looking at all kinds of stuff. So it really does help to make it real, in particular for maybe the people who don't live directly inside of the community area. And so I think people really need to see this stuff. So one thing that we're gonna do in this like walk around is we'll do this.
Quick question.
Go ahead, Fonda.
Interrupt you. When you say see the stuff, what do you mean? Just so I can understand what you mean.
Look at where the addresses are. Just this is the house. This is where the OU is, and kind of like what the OU looks like in real on the street terms. Okay. And so yeah, we're not going to look and see if there's lead in the dirt. It's not kind of our thing or anything like that.
Let's try to make sure I understand, that's all.
Yeah, so there's that. And then the other piece of it is also, Chuck doesn't know about this yet, but I want him to show us all of this, like the runoff and how that works, and like all of the areas that we're talking about and where the pollution lives. Those are going to be part of it. And so we're trying to figure out what would be the best bet. I will send out a Google Forms or an email just to solicit some ideas from you about things that maybe you want to see. And then also take into consideration accessibility issues as well. But yeah, this is going to be a good way to kind of continue this work and to make sure that we're really being community based. Also, this really does become a nice way to connect with our neighbors and to connect with folks, and bring them into this process as well. And in protecting their community. So that's coming down the pipe. It will be before it gets super duper cold, which was last week. So whatever. I mean, we'll try to get it in before we get freezing weather. But yeah, so we're going to have a community advisory group day in GES and do some things.
One thing I want to make sure is that the list that you guys have is off the 2019 5-year review. And since that time, there's quite a few homes that have been taken off that. So make sure you get the updated list that I provided to, I think, Bridget, did I not send those to you? Who did I send them to?
You send it to me. You can send it to me again and we'll double check because we don't want to create undue concerns.
Right. And the reason, and the problem also is that there's some that are in the process but have not been removed yet. So again, I want to make sure those you don't start causing a problem with people when they have taken care of a problem and then they get ostracized. So I want to make sure you guys have the right things.
I want to coordinate it very carefully and closely with CDPHE.
Okay.
And then we can send a revised list to EPA.
Okay. And I don't know why EPA is kind of silent on this. We've talked to them about that. And I suggest that you write them letters also because
we have written letters.
Well,
so many letters.
Continue writing letters because that's all we can do is that you got to remember they're the lead. We're the agency that assists them. And we are in an advisory group also in the sense that we advise them and at the same time we have to sign off together, but still that's something that we've asked them and told them, and for whatever reason they're not pursuing it as quickly as we like them to.
So all right, so we've all had the same experience with EPA, so we'll coordinate this carefully with you, Rachel, with Fonda, to make sure that we have the right lists.
I just have a quick, it's kind of going back, but this might actually be a good time to give them information about it. Do you, Fonda, do you happen to know when the demolition of the bridge is going to be?
No, I'm going to.
Their timeline on that?
Well, I'll find out tomorrow. I'm going to email the project manager at Kiewit. I know her personally, and I'll just ask her what's going on there. And I'm going to basically email her and find out. I shall do it tonight. Find out who her contacts are at CDPHE, where they're at, and then I will send that to the respond that back to the CAG email so that everybody can have that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next thing on our agenda is Rachel, and she's going to talk a bit about getting the CAG organized. Now that we're getting more friends, more people coming on board, we need to be more organized, and Rachel has come up with a plan. So
yes,
go with it.
So this is the first thing I'm going to put in the chat. There is a form. Fran doesn't have to do this. She's already my top student, and she earns an A, and everybody else we'll have to negotiate that. But I'm putting a form into the chat, and the form essentially just says, what are your priorities for the CAG? So I really am community oriented in my approach. And so I have lots of great ideas, but I want to make sure that you all are on board with these ideas, essentially. So we have our different, we have our OUs. And so what we really want to do is to create task lists for people and what needs to be done in order to accomplish our goals. So the first thing, I have some stuff set up. However, I want to know what programs you all are using currently, so that I'm not trying to start using some program that folks don't know anything about. So I want to know, so after you fill out the form, I kind of want to solicit ideas for which platforms to use. We can use Google Meets. We could use, Slack. We could use Google Docs. We could use Google Spreadsheets. We could use a Google, just a drive that's ours. So I want to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page. And once we have that set up, you'll be able to have, there'll be all the information for OU1 in one place, OU2, OU3. All of them will be compressed, and then we'll also have historical data as well. What we need to stop doing, essentially, is sending emails as our primary way to communicate, because that stuff is lost now for the most part. Like the historical archival data and sort of the history of this CAG, which is really important. It's important to keep a historical record and to make sure that people can go back in and see what we did. And so we need to have people stop sending emails as our primary communication. Once we get this set up, it will be perfectly appropriate to say, hey, check out that file on our Slack. And then people go there. But because then we're starting to log those conversations, right? And then they're not lost. And then we know what people did last year and the year before, and we don't go, let's recreate some new stuff. Let's recreate the wheel, right? So we have to start communicating in that way as a CAG in order to keep things going and to make it so that, you know, if one person leaves or one leader leaves, then it doesn't just all fall apart. All the stuff is still there. So what do we like as far as programs or platforms are concerned? Do we like using Google Drive? Do we like using Slack? What are the preferences? Or if you all don't know and you're like, I have no idea, you figure it out, then I can do that too.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's very helpful. And now we have, let's see, screen share. We have, thank you for participating. We have action items. We have action items for the, let's see, we have action items for the institutional controls. We have action items for the lead. Anything else? Okay, so our next meeting is October 15th, and I will be sending
Bridget?
around, huh?
Bridget?
Yes.
It's Christine. I can't hear really well, but did you have an action item to talk about OU2 with Chuck, what he presented tonight? Is that on the action list? I just didn't hear.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Don't leave. So Candy C. DeBaca has joined us. Candy, hello. It's nice to see you. We welcome you to the CAG.
She can't hear us.
We can't hear you, Candy. Let's see.
I don't see her either.
Candy, we cannot hear you.
She's got her camera off and she's probably muted as well.
Let's see.
Bridget?
Yes.
You said the next meeting is October 15th. That's a Thursday.
Oh, thank you, nitpicker. Let me see.
Hey, I reserved the time where I'm not available.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just check that. I had it on my screen.
I think it's the 13th.
The 13th. Thank you so much.
That's the second, so you want the third Tuesday, right?
I want the third Tuesday, which would be the 20th, October 20th.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm not used to leading the meetings. Fran usually leads the meetings. But since she can't hear her. So that's when the next meeting will be. And Candy, would you like to say anything? No. Well, does anyone else have anything to add or any ideas or questions or concerns before we close?
So my questions about which platform were not rhetorical at all. I actually want literal answers. So please help out with that.
Google Docs, I think that several of us have used Google Docs.
Do you want those help now? Rachel,
Yeah,
you want to chime? Oh, well, I use Google. This is Christine, and I can use Google Docs, you know, spreadsheet and the Drive. But you had me interested in Slack when we spoke last, but I have never used it. Okay. So that's my feedback.
Has anybody else used Slack with and kind of what your sense of it was?
We have between us, between Christine and myself, and I think a few other people, we have thousands of CAG documents. Don't worry, the history has not been lost. So we have thousands of CAG documents that we just need to get organized better. And they're in Google Drive. I don't know if that makes a difference, transferring them from.
No, it won't. I mean, if as long like if a PDF or a spreadsheet or a doc, any of those things can get put into the Slack. So no, that's not a problem.
Okay.
So Rachel, can I ask a question? This is Michelle.
You can ask 20 of them. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was supposed to be on Slack with the Movement for a People's Party, but I've never really got into it. How learning intensive is it? I mean, it seems a little complex to me. I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, well, Michelle, your point is well taken, and there's so many features to it, and sometimes if people aren't kind of up on it, they kind of just leave everything there, and then it's really hard for people to navigate it because there's 20 different rooms or 20 different things.
That's what I'm afraid of.
We can actually delete some of those things. Like you don't have to have all of those things displayed at once, so it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. We can just use literally the things that we want to use.
Right. Okay.
Well, this is Christine again. After hearing that, I think maybe we should stick with Google Docs.
Okay. Fair enough.
But, you know, I don't want to make the decision, but if nobody else is using Slack yet, except you and your schoolwork, right, and your teaching.
No, I don't use Slack for college. I use like an online learning management system. I've used Slack in the past before with different community groups, like the Poor People's Campaign or whatever. They have a lot of those groups have their own Slack. So, yeah.
Well, very informative tonight, and I just use AOL and. You can just forward stuff to me on my AOL account. I usually get it and can open it up.
Dennis, if you get on any of the dating services, you're going to have to ditch AOL. Everyone will know you're ancient.
Fran.
Yes.
Hey.
This off and put it back on, and my blue light on.
Great, good.
For me right now, but no, I am an AOL person also, Dennis. I need to try to learn Google Docs if I can get that. Whatever is the simplest way to do this is what I would like to see happen. And you know, if Candy is still there, she's muted. I'm Candy. I just would like to hear a few words from you. Are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
I am here, and I miss you guys, and I love you guys, and I'm glad I got to catch you guys before you left. Been jumping around between things. Obviously, you've been watching my crazy life, and what happens when you're the tip of the spear. But I wanted to know what you guys do for me with CAG. I've been keeping kind of posted through Rachel, but haven't really been able to tap in because your meetings overlap with at least 4 other meetings that I have been jumping between on these evenings. So would love to know what your standing meeting schedule is, how I can help at the local level, and if you guys are plugged into the Suncor settlement.
the Suncor settlement, Yadira Sanchez has been working on that, but she just went through some serious surgery, so I'm not sure where that's going. But I think that GES needs to be saying we want some of that money from the Suncor settlement. So Candy, if you can do anything to help us get that, or to put some people together, I think it's very important. We need to get people's homes well insulated, and we need to get people moving toward renewable energy in any way we can. So tell us, what do you think?
Well, the state, the group that was working on it at the state level contacted me about it, and I pointed them in your direction, the Latino Forum, and then the separate RNOs. That way they could connect with all of you, and not sure where they are in their process, but I'll circle back on it. But you guys are the only them to. I obviously don't believe that other parts of my district should access the dollars. I think this is very specific to the neighborhood impacted along that corridor, the I-70 corridor, most adjacent to Suncor. So I haven't connected them to anybody else but GES and all of you.
So Candy, one of the issues that the CAG has, you'll notice that we have wonderful representation here from CDPHE, who has been very, very helpful. Denver has been absolutely unhelpful. The charge of the CAG is to participate in the process of decision-making about what happens, the planning and the work that goes on in the CAG. And we're supposed to be a part of that and to inform the community. And Denver and EPA have basically just shut us out of the process. So at some
You want me to
point,
take her? Oh, so she had a poop?
Yeah.
maybe we could have a meeting with you, a brief meeting, and just bring you sort of up to date on a few issues and things that we could use some help with as administrative issues with the CAG.
Christine,
absolutely, that makes sense. And you know, I fight my uphill battles with Denver every single day, and don't expect DDPHE to get on board. But I mean, there are alternative routes that we can pursue.
Right. We would not ask them. We don't want to be asking just to be asking, just to make a point. But when we need something, it would be nice if we might be able to use a back channel.
Awesome.
Fran.
If I can say one more thing, Linda, I'm happy that you can find some information for us about the taking down of the overpass on I-70. I think the important piece of that too is keep in mind that in other sections of the country and even in South Denver, they put up a hole to cover the area that they were cleaning. And even Marie Van how they've done tenting down on San Drive. They put a tent over a whole square block to clean it up. And I think that we all have to figure out how we are going to not let anything happen without them tenting whatever they're taking down. We cannot have them just tell us we're going to water it down. It has to be tented. And the people working on those projects also need to be required to wear the correct, whatever, face masks and clothing to not carry all of that stuff home with them. So does that make sense?
Yeah, and I saw the emails going back and forth about that.
Yes.
I don't know who is on the phone, but has Kiewit been at the table?
No.
Because Fonda, if I'm correct, Denver and CDOT both deny that they're personally responsible parties, correct?
One more time, I didn't quite hear you.
Denver, the city of Denver and CDOT both deny that they're PRPs, right?
Well, no, Denver's a PRP for OU2.
Not for OU1 with the highway expansion though, right?
No, because OU1 does not include the highway expansion because that's considered commercial property.
Right.
Well, OU1, the highway is through the middle of OU1, right?
I understand, yes, but OU1 only deals with residential properties. It does not deal with commercial properties. And mind you, I'm not the person who made that determination. That was done back in the 90s through EPA. So that's the reason why the I-70 is not considered part of OU1.
Of any
It's part of the Superfund site.
So that may be the reason why we need to look at an OU4 being opened by the EPA, and whether we can get them to do that is another question. But I do think there's an awful lot of pollution on commercial property, on industrial property, and they all seem to we are going to be doing any cleaning up. I just, that really infuriates me that businesses to be held to the same standard as residential properties. If you look at the bridge at the overpass, that has been painted with lead paint for how many years? And they've had an exception to be able to use lead paint because it's a business, it's a commercial property, it's industrial property. They've all had exemptions from getting rid of the lead in the paint that they use. So there's going to be a lot of lead floating around in the air if they do not cover that highway correctly. So however we have to mobilize, whatever we have to mobilize, I think we have to be looking right now and preparing for what's coming. Thank you.
Fonda, is there any kind of state effort to understand and monitor the potential lead impact of the demolition? Is there anything that compares in recent history to this demolition?
It's my understanding that this is a typical process that goes on across the country. It's not just Denver, it's everywhere. And so they have things in place on how they do it. They have to perform a survey, and then it's like the asbestos abatement. What happens is you perform a survey, then you put in a permit for how you're going to do it, and then you have a third party, which is not part of the contractor, that has to certify the work. And I'm assuming the same thing happens with the lead demolition. As I said, it's not my area of expertise. I know asbestos much better than I know lead, but there is a lead working group at CDPHE, and they do work with different deals. And I'm not sure who those people are, but I can find out. But I do know that we've got people that are in the environmental justice portion of CDPHE that have been contacting out to those people also. And I believe that some of, go ahead.
Can you connect our office to the people with the lead study group at the state level?
I will find that out. And Candy, if you can do me a favor, because I don't have your current email address, if you can send me a quick email to just, my Fonda.apostolopoulos, and that way I'll make sure that I can figure out see if I can find out who those people are.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll do that right now as we're speaking.
Perfect.
Marie, did I miss anything talking about the I-70? Because you work for...
A note actually from Kiewit late today, and they said that there was a study and they didn't find any lead, but then they said that there's going to be another, it sounded like more thorough study. So it was a very weird email. And so I asked some pointed questions, like I asked for the records either from CDOT Region 1 or CDOT headquarters about when it had been painted and when the previous paint layers had been removed, so that we can find out, if it ever has been removed, you know, or likely there's, you know, there's older paint layers with lead. So at any rate, I got them some questions that they should answer. I'll keep.
And typically that's a part of that lead survey is they have to do a survey where they scrape down and basically take a sampling of the property. Just because someone says it was painted with that doesn't matter. They have to verify it through sampling.
Is there also asbestos involved in there, Fonda?
I'm not sure, but I do know they have to do both the lead for sure, and they sometimes have to do asbestos depending on what the constituents are. But they do an entire survey before they can demolish the building, or either a building and or a structure also.
What happens with the cement dust? What is cement dust? Are those pee?
My understanding is they still have to do dust mitigation, things like that, but there's a process in place, and those are, they have to have approved processes in place before they get the permit. And every site's different depending on where it is and things like that, obviously.
So thank you very much, Fonda. We would like to be, we'd like to get copies of the surveys and the plans, and we would like to have the opportunity for a public hearing and have our experts look at it all over, and then to have an opportunity for a public hearing so that the community can hear it straight from the horse's mouth and have an opportunity to ask questions, because there is a lot of lead and a lot of other stuff that's going to come down when that bridge comes down that's going to impact people who are living right next to it. I'm thinking of Drew Dutcher.
Just to let you know, all I can do is ask and tell people that are to be. I can't make them do a public meeting. I can't make them do that stuff. So all I can do is ask and let them, obviously the people higher up understand your concerns, but it'll fall upon their shoulders, not mine.
Okay, thank you.
Who is 6627? Who is 6627?
Is that Chuck?
Chuck, is that you? Are you trying to speak? Now he turned it off.
So I think with that, unless there are any more questions or concerns,
can you hear me, Chris? Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Christine.
We can hear you.
Fran asked who 6627 was, and I said, it's Christine, and I'm rolling my eyes. I know, she's making fun of me. I'm rolling my eyes because I just keep hearing the same thing. They have a process in place. Don't worry about it. It's just,
Christine, I'm not saying don't worry about it. I'm just saying there's a process in place that they do. That's not my program, okay?
I know, and
I have to rely on those people.
I agree, and we fought this battle a long time ago and tried to, remember when I asked you for the material management plan for CDOT because CDOT kept saying they're not under CERCLA because they're commercial property, and there's so many issues with that. So I don't know how we can change that at this point, or if we can change it at this point, but it would be good to at least know what they know, what CDOT knows about the amount of lead that's there and the amount of other things that are going to come down when that bridge comes down. So I'm not saying we can change the whole thing, but having their knowledge of what the risk is for people who are right under it, right near it, would be very useful.
The children in the
and
school.
you do have the materials management plan that was provided to you last year, or actually almost 2 years ago now.
But that's not the same as the demolition for.
Candy should.
Yes, I do.
Candy should approach the higher ups to get the details on that.
Already on it as we speak. I'm emailing them right now.
Good.
You are fast.
I'm wondering if we can't get our own, I put it in the chat, an independent investigation of the lead on the bridge, at the paint. Could we get some paint chips or something and run them through I don't know what they do, microscope?
Usually they'll those tests can
Great
be
idea.
I think, and usually they'll say, well, you know, you didn't collect them with the right kind of spatula or whatever. So it becomes dueling science.
Okay, I mean, so we find the right spatula.
Basically, it's not that easy. You have to get an industrial hygienist who specializes in that, and then they have the protocols in place, and it's no different. The protocols are for the same for every industrial hygienist. It's just every state may be a little different.